A slow-moving storm system is targeting 47 million people across the northern plains with 1.75 inches of loaded moisture. Behind it, a G3 geomagnetic storm from 3 solar flares is hitting Earth tonight with GPS and power grid disruption possible. And beneath the same 8 states in the storm path, 20,000 water wells have already gone permanently and silently dry. I have been watching this pattern all morning, and 3 completely separate crises are colliding on the same day. Stay with me because at the 9-minute mark, I will show you something about the water under your food supply. At the very end, I have a Gulf tropical signal that changed overnight and every coastal state needs to see. Folks, this is not a normal weather day, and I want to make sure you have the full picture before this evening. Here's what makes today's setup more dangerous than a typical severe weather afternoon across the northern plains. A slow-moving frontal boundary is stalling over the Dakotas and locking storms over the same neighborhoods for hours. That pattern is called training storms, and it turns a rainy afternoon into a flash flood emergency fast. No joke. The precipitable water running at 1.75 inches is abnormally high for early June and means heavy rain per hour. The SPC has a slight risk covering eastern Dakotas and western Minnesota with a 15% chance of significant hail. Good Lord, damaging winds between 35 and 50 miles per hour, isolated tornadoes, and flash flooding are all possible today. Earl runs a grain operation outside Bismarck and told me the sky already had that greenish tint by noon today. Earl, get your family and equipment to high ground before 3 this afternoon because this one moves fast after dark. Drop your city in the comments right now and tell me what conditions look like outside your window this afternoon. I will come back tonight with a specific update for every city that checks in with me down below. Here is the city-by-city timing so you know exactly when these storms arrive in your part of the country today. Bismarck and Mandan, your storm window opens between 2 and 4 this afternoon with hail the primary early threat. Aberdeen and Watertown, South Dakota, you are in the training corridor and flash flooding is your biggest risk today. Fargo and Grand Forks, the complex reaches you in the evening and rainfall totals could exceed 2 inches overnight. Sioux Falls, you are on the southern edge of the slight risk, but the slow boundary means repeated rounds are possible. Minneapolis and St. Paul, the Twin Cities sit in a marginal risk zone with locally heavy rain possible by tonight. Rapid City and Pierre, both of you are in the wind and hail corridor through the afternoon hours today. Omaha and Lincoln, Nebraska, flash flood potential is elevated for your metro areas through the overnight hours. Northeast Minnesota, you actually sit in the drier pocket of this system and your rainfall totals will run lighter. Now here's the part that the whole eastern half of the country needs to understand about this system right now. This storm does not stop after it hammers the Dakotas today because it keeps tracking east through the entire weekend. Friday, it pushes through the upper Mississippi Valley from Iowa through Wisconsin into Illinois with more severe weather. Saturday, it reaches the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley covering Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, and northern Ohio all at once. Let me walk through the weekend timeline city by city so everyone from Iowa to the East Coast can plan ahead now. Friday, Omaha, Des Moines, Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, Milwaukee, Madison, and Green Bay are all in the severe weather zone. Chicago and the western suburbs. Friday brings a chance of damaging wind gusts over 30 miles per hour across the metro. Kansas City, Peoria, Topeka, and Indianapolis also fall into the Friday corridor as energy tracks steadily northeast. Saturday, Detroit, Cleveland, Columbus, Pittsburgh, and Cincinnati are all watching this same system arrive from the west. The Great Lakes corridor from Green Bay through Milwaukee to Chicago could see 2 to 4 inches of local rainfall. Sunday, this system crosses the Appalachians and pushes into the northeast and mid-Atlantic with heavy downpours. New York City, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C. are all tracking heavy rain and local flooding risks Sunday. Boston and Providence, you are at the tail end with rain arriving Sunday evening into Monday morning. Early next week, the remnants drift into the southeast, meaning Atlanta, Charlotte, and Richmond stay in the rain threat. Margaret is a retired teacher in Columbus who asked whether Saturday's rain would affect her granddaughter's soccer game. Margaret, Saturday looks wet and breezy in Columbus with the heaviest downpours most likely between 10 and 4. Here's the kicker that catches people off guard every single time a storm system like this rolls through the Midwest. Right behind the storms, a high-pressure dome moves in and temperatures spike hard into the 80s and 90s by the weekend. Upper Midwest cities that just got soaked will swing from flash flood watches to heat advisories within 48 hours flat. Dew points climbing into the upper 60s and low 70s behind this system will make the heat feel oppressive and sticky. Phoenix is already tracking 107 degrees Thursday and 108 Friday with the desert Southwest locked under that heat dome. Now here's something completely different that affects every single person watching regardless of where you live. While the severe weather was developing overnight, the sun fired 3 major solar flares aimed directly at Earth. NOAA issued a G3 strong geomagnetic storm warning for tonight and tomorrow after flares registering M 9.3, M 7.7, and X 1.0. A G3 storm is strong enough to temporarily disrupt power grids, GPS navigation systems, and high-frequency radio signals. If you have medical equipment at home that depends on GPS timing or satellite signals, check your backup systems today. Farmers and pilots relying on GPS guidance systems should activate manual backup modes before the peak hits tonight. Here's the good news nobody is talking about. Aurora Borealis could be visible as far south as Illinois and Ohio tonight. If skies are clear in your area, step outside after 10 o'clock and look north because this opportunity is rare. The last time a G3 storm hit in early June, aurora was visible from Tennessee, Arkansas, and even parts of northern Alabama. Areas in North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and upstate New York have the best viewing conditions tonight. Take photos if you see it and drop your location in the comments so I can share your reports with everyone watching. Dale farms wheat outside Garden City, Kansas, and asked me if his GPS-guided tractor would work reliably today. Dale, switch to manual mode this afternoon because GPS accuracy could degrade significantly during tonight's storm peak. Now here is that 9-minute promise, and this one has nothing to do with today's storms or tonight's solar event. Beneath the same 8 states getting hammered right now, a crisis has been building quietly for 75 years. The Ogallala Aquifer, the underground reservoir that irrigates a third of all farmland in the United States, is dying. Not shrinking, not stressed, dying, and once it is empty, it is never coming back on any human timeline. The aquifer sits beneath 174,000 square miles across Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, New Mexico, Wyoming, and South Dakota. It took 6 million years to fill and holds an estimated 3 billion acre-feet of ancient fresh water underground. That is roughly the equivalent of Lake Huron sitting invisibly beneath the farms and ranches of the American heartland. Here's the number that stops people cold. The aquifer recharges at just 0.24 inches per year, about 6 millimeters. Meanwhile, irrigation systems are pulling it out at 8 to 24 inches per year, depending on the region and the season. We are draining this aquifer 30 to 100 times faster than any natural process can ever replace it. Plain and simple. In just 75 years, Americans have permanently pumped out a full quarter of what took 6 million years to accumulate. Across the southern Texas panhandle alone, 69% of the original saturated thickness has already been removed forever. A well drilled in 1960 produced between 400 and 800 gallons per minute. That same well in 2020 produces 50 to 150. The Texas Water Development Board counts approximately 20,000 wells that have already gone permanently and completely dry. Each of those 20,000 dry wells represents a farm family making impossible decisions about what comes next for them. The town of Happy, Texas, population 578, officially notified residents their sole water source is projected to fail. Booker, Texas is planning a regional pipeline to save 1,500 residents at an estimated cost of $200 million. Land values in Sherman, Hansford, and Dumas counties, Texas have dropped between 30 and 50% in a single decade. Sandra is a retired nurse in Amarillo who said her neighbor's farm well went quiet for the first time last summer. Sandra, what your neighbor experienced is happening to thousands of families across the panhandle right now. No two ways about it. Here is the part that should alarm every American who has ever bought groceries, and that is no joke at all. The federal government has known about this depletion since the 1970s and published detailed reports every single year. The most ambitious federal response enrolled 500,000 irrigated acres in voluntary conservation out of 25 million total. That covers roughly 2% of the problem, while depletion continues unchecked across the remaining 98%. When this water is gone, the high plains will not grow the same crops, and American grocery prices will reflect it permanently. Most Americans have no idea this aquifer exists, and that is the part of this story that keeps me up at night. If you know a farmer or anyone living above the Ogallala, do yourself a solid and share this video with them today. Most people who find out about the Ogallala tell me they wish they had known about this years ago. Now let me close with the tropical picture because the Gulf changed overnight and every coastal state needs to hear this. The National Hurricane Center upgraded development chances in the eastern Pacific and added a second area to watch. Tropical Storm Amanda is already organized in the East Pacific, with Boris and Christina forming close behind her now. A separate area in the Western Caribbean is showing a 50% development chance over the next 7 days. The overnight model runs change the projected track northward, and that is the shift everyone needs to understand. Yesterday, both GFS and European were pushing Gulf development westward into Mexico, and that is no longer the case. The 51-member European ensemble now shows a 40% probability of tropical storm strength gusts in the northeastern Gulf. June 3rd was the official start of hurricane season 2026, and Gulf sea surface temperatures are running above normal. The Western Caribbean from the Yucatan through Cuba and the Bahamas is also running above average sea surface temperatures. Any system entering that warm water corridor has immediate fuel access to develop and potentially intensify very quickly. Models are showing a potential spin reaching the northeastern Gulf somewhere around June 10th through the 13th. Florida's Gulf Coast, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and coastal Georgia all need to be watching this development closely. Tropical moisture from the Caribbean is already pushing heavy rain into southern Florida around June 10th and 11th. Bob is a retired electrician in Tampa who asked me whether he should start pulling out his hurricane shutters this week. Bob, shutters can wait, but mark my words, your hurricane kit needs to be checked and ready before June 10th. If you are in today's storm path across the Dakotas, Minnesota, or Nebraska, send this to someone you care about. Gulf Coast residents from Texas to Florida need their emergency kit checked and ready before June 10th arrives. Let me give you your action items for today, and I am going to keep this flat out simple for everybody right now. Northern Plains, flash flooding is your #1 threat today, so know every low-lying road in your area before dark. Turn around and do not drown, because 6 inches of moving water can push a full-size truck right off the road. Charge your phone and backup battery today because the G3 storm may disrupt GPS while the severe weather follows tonight. East Coast from Pittsburgh to Boston, a wet weekend is coming and Sunday is the day to stay flexible on outdoor plans. Southwest, Phoenix at 108 degrees Friday is dangerous, excessive heat territory, so hydrate and limit midday sun exposure. Gulf Coast from Texas to Florida, watch the tropical signal through next week and have your emergency kit ready now. Good Lord, a lot is happening on one single day, and staying informed is your single best preparation for all of it. Now let me talk about the second severe weather threat today that is not getting nearly enough attention. West Texas and New Mexico are dealing with their own separate severe weather setup this afternoon and evening. The Davis Mountains and Big Bend area have a flash flood risk from storms that train over the same canyon country. El Paso, Midland, Odessa, and Lubbock all need to watch for strong isolated storms developing after 3 this afternoon. Albuquerque and Santa Fe, you are in the moderate risk zone for flash flooding as these cells drift north along the mountains. Heads up to anyone driving on Interstate 10 across West Texas tonight because flash flooding can close that highway fast. Here is some historical context that makes today's setup worth taking seriously for the upper Midwest right now. The summer of 1993 saw a slow-moving frontal boundary stall over the upper Midwest for almost 2 straight months. Training thunderstorms dropped rainfall totals across Iowa, Illinois, and Missouri that shattered 500-year flood records. The 1993 Great Flood inundated 9 states, caused $15 billion in damage, and killed 50 people across the region. We are not saying today matches 1993, but the atmospheric setup of a stalled boundary with heavy moisture is identical. The difference in 1993 was that the boundary stayed locked in place for weeks instead of days, so every day mattered. Today's slow boundary is the early warning sign that deserves your attention, folks, plain and simple. Betty is a retired bookkeeper in Sioux City who has lived through 3 major Mississippi Valley flood events. Betty said the sky this morning looked almost identical to the morning before the 2008 Cedar Rapids flood began. Let me go deeper on the weekend timeline because several more cities need specific guidance before this system arrives. Rochester, Minnesota, and La Crosse, Wisconsin, Friday evening brings your highest severe weather chance of the week. Springfield, Illinois, and St. Louis, Missouri, Friday night into Saturday morning watch for the squall line moving through. Indianapolis and Fort Wayne, Indiana, Saturday afternoon is your primary window with damaging wind gusts possible. Hartford, Providence, and Springfield, Massachusetts, Sunday afternoon into Sunday evening is your heavy rain window. Portland, Maine, and Burlington, Vermont, Sunday night into Monday morning closes out the northeast passage of this system. Here's the good news, no single city is looking at more than 3 to 4 inches of total rainfall this weekend. Let me give you some historical context on G3 storms because this one ranks higher than most Americans realize. The last major G5 geomagnetic storm in May 2024 produced aurora visible from Florida, Texas, and even Puerto Rico. That event was the strongest solar storm to hit Earth in 20 years, and it disrupted some agricultural GPS systems. Tonight's G3 is 1 level below that historic event, but still strong enough to affect sensitive electronic systems. If you're on a pacemaker or have other implanted electronic medical devices, contact your doctor about any precautions. For amateur radio operators across the northern tier, high-frequency bands will be severely degraded through tomorrow morning. Airline passengers on polar routes from Chicago, New York, and Seattle to Europe may experience rerouting tonight. Good Lord, aurora over the American Midwest does not happen often, so look north after dark tonight. Now let me connect the Ogallala story to something every American feels at the grocery store every single week. The high plains fed by this aquifer produces roughly 30% of all the beef consumed in the United States annually. It produces a quarter of American cotton, massive quantities of corn, sorghum, wheat, and soybeans simultaneously. When irrigated acreage in the Texas Panhandle alone dropped 40% between 2000 and 2020, beef prices responded. The average American family now spends roughly 13% more on beef in real terms than they did just a decade ago. Part of that increase traces directly to reduced cattle capacity in the Texas Panhandle as well. Water costs rose. The Dust Bowl of the 1930s destroyed topsoil that took thousands of years to form across the same 8-state region. The federal government spent billions on soil conservation programs, and the topsoil did eventually slowly come back. The Ogallala will not come back because the recharge rate of 6 millimeters per year is essentially geological zero. If you want your grandchildren to afford beef, this aquifer story belongs in the national news every single week. Let me zoom out on the Atlantic season picture because June 3rd through 15th is a critical window to understand. The Atlantic main development region from the Lesser Antilles to the coast of Africa is running below normal sea temps. El Nino wind shear is doing its job suppressing deep Atlantic development for now, but that window does not last forever. The Gulf of Mexico and the Western Caribbean are a completely different story with sea temperatures well above normal. Any low-pressure system entering the Gulf right now has warm water 150 feet deep to feed on immediately. That rapid intensification threat is what makes a Gulf storm in June 2026 potentially more dangerous than average. Hurricane preparedness for coastal residents means having 7 days of supplies, not 3, starting right now today. Bonnie Greer is a retired teacher in Pensacola who has kept her hurricane kit stocked and ready since April 1st. Bonnie, y'all are doing it exactly right, and every Gulf Coast family watching this should follow that same approach. Now let me talk about what comes after this weekend because the mid-June pattern shift is something to prepare for. A second Omega block is going to build over southern Canada and the Great Lakes region around June 8th and 9th. That high will lock in heat across the Midwest with temperatures pushing back into the upper 80s and low 90s again. Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, and Columbus are all looking at a significant heat up between June 8th and 14th. The Corn Belt needs that warmth for crop development, but the soil moisture situation is going to be the deciding factor. European model delivers rain to the Mississippi Valley corridor before the heat builds, and that keeps July risk low. GFS model dries that same corridor out first and lets the heat bake already dry soils, which raises July risk sharply. The next 14 days of rainfall across Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana are going to answer that question for the season. Let me get more specific on the bottom line because each region has a different action item for this week. Great Plains farmers, check your GPS backup systems today and have paper maps of your low water crossings on hand. Midwest homeowners, clean your gutters and check your sump pumps before Saturday because heavy rain is tracking your way. East Coast families, Sunday is the day to move outdoor furniture inside because gusty winds follow the heavy rain. Gulf Coast residents, this is not a panic situation, but it is absolutely a preparation situation starting right now. And for everyone above the Ogallala Aquifer states, contact your local water authority and ask about their long-term plan. I opened this video with 3 numbers: 47 million people under threat, a G3 solar storm, and 20,000 dry wells. Every one of those 3 numbers is going to be larger and more consequential by this time next week, no joke. The storm system tracks east and grows, the solar cycle is ramping up toward its 2025 peak, and the aquifer keeps dropping. None of those 3 things are waiting for the news cycle to catch up, and neither should the people watching this video. Folks who come through weeks like this are always the ones who had a plan locked and loaded ahead of time. Dakotas tonight, know your shelter before dark and turn around the moment you hit any water on the road. Drop your city in the comments, tell me what you see outside right now, and I will get back to you. Stay safe, stay smart, take care of the people around you, God bless, and we will see you in the next updates.